second chance to make a first impression. Will Rogers.
People tend to hold on to their first impressions. That's why those first descriptions can be so important. You don't even necessarily look at people that carefully after a while. You just hold on to that early impression. Miranda July.
Good morning. My name is Katy Maxon. I'm a sixth form day student from Simsbury, Connecticut, and I don't agree with either of the quotes that Mia and Emily just read. Well, maybe sometimes, but when it comes to how I got to be standing in front of you today, I don't. Subconsciously, we as human beings judge things, places, and people based on first impressions all the time. We learn as children to never judge a book by its cover. As simple as these words are, I have found throughout my life that it's much easier said than done. Whether they are true or not, we all make assumptions and decisions every day around our first impressions. I remember entering the 3rd grade at Squadron Line School in Simsbury. As long ago as it was, I remember walking into class extremely eager to meet my new teacher and see my friends. After saying hello, we all went around the room and told the teacher some things about us and talked about what we did during that summer. Finally, it was my turn. Only 3 words barely escaped my mouth when my teacher cut me off. "Oh goodness, sweetie, are you sick? You sound like you have an awful cold." My face turned bright red, tears filled my eyes, and I quietly told her, "No, I always sound like this." I have learned being someone born with a voice that always makes me sound like I have a cold does not mix well being someone that also talks 100 miles an hour. This trend of my teachers assuming I was sick on the first day of school continued on for the next several years. At this point, I'm used to it. But this wasn't the only false impression that people made of me. In the 7th grade, I was extremely scared of the 8th graders because all the boys looked like they were 30 years old, and the girls referred to us as Sebbies, which made it all around a strange year. The best part, though, was when the 8th grade boys, who were already frightening enough, decided that it would be funny to yell, "Hey Katy, what's the weather going to be tomorrow?" Down the hallways for everyone to hear. Of course, my 12-year-old self tried to act cool and just rolled my eyes at them. I thought that people would stop assuming that because my dad was a weatherman for NBC News, that I magically knew the weather. Let me tell you, it's not easy walking into middle school every day knowing that your classmates were likely watching your dad on TV while they were eating breakfast. However, just a couple of months ago, I was at Fitzgerald's while it was raining outside. To my surprise, the same boy who had made fun of me in 7th grade was the cashier. He didn't say anything to me at first, but then he looked up at me and quietly said, "Did your dad say it was going to rain?" I don't know, Brendan, how about you just watch the news sometime? I'll now save you all the breath of asking and tell you that no, I do not always know the weather. While people made assumptions about me, I also have a history of misjudging others based on first impressions. When I ponder what the largest misjudgment I have ever made is, Westminster comes to mind. Let me tell you the story of how I ended up here so you understand why. If somebody had told me back in middle school that one day I would switch from Simsbury High School to attend Westy, I would have laughed in their face. As a middle schooler at Henry James Memorial School, I had a pretty solid group of friends forming, and I was looking forward to all the activities that would take place in high school. Trying out for the soccer team, prom, dress-up days, senior outings, homecoming, and Friday night football games. It was all so exciting to me as a 13-year-old, but it was also extremely scary. Once high school rolled around, I was a little freshman with braces who wore chino shorts and a sweater with an obnoxious statement necklace to school almost every day. The senior girls were all so much older looking than I felt, and carried around Michael Kors purses for backpacks, while, as I already mentioned, the boys all looked 30. And yes, I was still constantly harassed about the weather, but it's fine. I was scared for sure, but I knew that it would be okay with my best friends by my side. Fast forward to the end of freshman year. My friends and I had by now established a pretty solid group of guy friends that we hung out with regularly. One night we were all together in one of our friends' basements when my girlfriends and I noticed our male friends gathered around a phone smiling and scrolling. We asked what they were looking at, and they refused to tell us until I was able to grab the phone out of one of their hands. It was the Instagram profile of a girl that none of us knew, and when we asked, they replied, "Oh, it's a girl that goes to Westy." While our friends continued to fangirl, our egotistical tween selves stuck up our noses and immediately formed a jealous grudge against our friend's new obsession and the school that came along with it. Of course, saying this now out loud sounds completely stupid, but I guess that's the mind of a preteen for you. Fast forward to sophomore year. One of my best friends is leaving to repeat her sophomore year at Berkshire School. I seriously had no understanding of why she was doing it. She said that she had a dream of being a hockey goalie in college and that switching schools would more likely get her there. I didn't get why though. I mean, our girls' hockey program wasn't great, but it was by no means bad. And what was a private school going to give her that Simsbury High School would not? My friends and I were very upset, not really able to comprehend why she made the choice to leave all of us, but we had to let her go. Fast forward to junior year. The beginning of that year was, to sum up, horrendous. With the soccer season right at the start of the year, I was hoping to begin the most stressful year of high school on a positive high note. Needless to say, the year did not get off to a great start. Our team was pretty bad, and I was convinced that my coach hated me, but that's a sob story that I'll save for another time. To give you an idea of how that season went, I remember storming home towards the end of the season in tears, stomping into my house, screaming at my parents that I was going to quit soccer forever. Looking back, it was an extremely overdramatic thing to do, but the positive year that I had hoped to begin never began. One of the only highlights of that season was when my team traveled up Williams Hill to practice with the Westminster girls varsity team. I knew a couple people, some only by name, but I met a lot of people that day, some who are sitting in this room right now, who I had no idea would become some of my best friends. The welcoming environment and positive attitudes that embodied the Westminster team was a drastic change from the practices that I was used to. Everyone was laughing, and I couldn't think of a time that I had laughed at a high school soccer practice before then. After that, Westminster came up more and more often. I couldn't help but wonder how much better our team would be if so many of those girls on the Westy team from Simsbury didn't go to Westminster. I thought to myself, what's so great about Westy anyway? Why do those kids not want to go to Simsbury High School? At the time, I just did not understand and held sort of a grudge against the school for stealing away potential teammates. Fast forward to the postseason of my junior year. I was playing soccer for FSA, a club team based in Farmington, Connecticut. It was my second year playing for the club, and I was hopeful to erase the high school season that had just come to an end. One night, after one of our first practices, I looked over to the sidelines and saw my dad talking to Mrs. Eckerson. I had known that Catherine Eckerson was playing for the team in the age group above me, so I wasn't too surprised. However, when the practice ended and I got into the car, my dad had some interesting things to say. He told me that Mrs. Eckerson had asked if he had ever considered sending me to Westminster. His initial reaction was a slight laugh and a head shake, since the conversation had been brought up before, but it never seemed remotely realistic. I kind of laughed too, and I remember thinking to myself, I would never switch high schools, especially only 1 year away from graduating. But I think something inside of me did a complete 180 after hearing the details of my dad's conversation. The very next day, I found myself gazing at the Westminster website, reading articles and looking at pictures. I wondered what my life would be like with a completely different group of friends at a new school, with a new soccer team, and mostly appealing, a new coach. Of course, I didn't want to leave my friends, and I never once thought that I ever would. But soon enough, I found myself filling out an application to the school without really telling my parents. In about 2 months following my dad's conversation with Mrs. Eckerson, I had an application completed, along with a high school transcript, 2 recommendation letters from English and math teachers, and an SSAT score, which I didn't even know was a thing. I had mentioned it to my dad a couple of times, but my mom had no idea because she has a history of refusing to talk about life-altering decisions. In what felt like the blink of an eye, March 10th of 2016 rolled around, and at 7 o'clock that morning, I was accepted into Westminster. Although I had gotten in, which was what I'd been waiting for, it still didn't feel real that I was intending on leaving my friends for a new school. I ran downstairs to tell my mom, and we celebrated. At this point, she couldn't avoid the decision anymore. We attended revisit day and went through the routine of an accepted student that spring. I met with Miss Warner, or as C-Dubs, most of you know her, frequently at Starbucks, since she would be my new soccer coach and advisor the following school year. We talked about the team, but mostly about the transition that I would be making. Since she was also a repeat when she attended Westy, she was able to give me tons of advice that I would use once the year started. I had to notify Simsbury High that I wouldn't be returning the next year, and say goodbye to the teachers and counselors that I had known for 3 years. The hardest part, though, was saying goodbye to my friends who I'd gone to school with since the elementary school days. Sure, I was going to be living in the same town and living at home, and I'd be able to see them on weekends, but I would not be walking across the stage with them at Iron Horse Boulevard at the Simsbury Meadows for graduation. Telling them that I was transferring was when the whole thing became real for me. I never thought that I would be willing to leave my friends. Even now, standing up here ready to graduate in a couple of months, I can't fully answer the question, why did you come to Westy? I usually answer with something about soccer and academics, which is true, but there had to have been something more to it. Something inside of me was surely pushing me to make this change, and I'm glad that I did. I think that what makes my decision to switch to Westminster so unique is that I've lived in Simsbury my whole life, yet I have never known what Westy is really about until last year. My first memory of the school was when I was 12, and I was going off to one of my first sleepaway camps. We packed the car up with bags, soccer equipment, and snacks to make the whole 7-minute drive all the way to Westminster. I unpacked all my stuff into a room in Alumni House with one of my best friends at the time. The only other thing that I remember about that camp was having C-Dubs as a counselor. She says she doesn't remember me from it, but it's okay. The point is, living in Simsbury, you don't really know about Westy until you're involved in it in some way. Before the new dining hall stuck out of campus like a sore thumb, Westminster seemed like merely a sign that you pass on Hot Meadow Street on your way to Little City or Harvest Cafe. It hit me when I began writing this talk that I never really took into consideration that there was another high school in my town, filled with almost 400 other students going through the same journey that I was going through at Simsbury High School. Until you're a student here, you cannot truly understand Westminster and its core values. My friends from home often ask me, why do you stay at school until 10 o'clock at night if you don't live there? Because it's where my friends are, and teachers that will help and support me, and now a student center that sells popcorn chicken, so why would I ever leave? When I told them how last year I had dinner with my physics teacher almost every night getting extra help, shout out to Ms. Rappold, they looked at me like I was crazy. Or when I told them about how the end of last year, when our whole school stood in long lines and hugged each other, that got quite the reaction out of them. To put it into perspective, there are about as many kids per graduating class at Simsbury as there are in our entire school here at Westminster. So you can see how that would be shocking from somebody from Simsbury High. The aspects and traditions like these make Westminster's community so incredibly unique. Sometimes your first impressions of people or places are going to be wrong. Whether you're on the search for a college or a job or you're meeting new people, sometimes it takes more than one first impression to really learn what someone or someplace is really about. I never expected to be on the path that I am now. As a Simsbury resident for almost 19 years, I would have never known what a difference a sign on Hot Meadow Street could make in my life. Standing here in front of a community that's changed my outlook on the future, a new group of friends that I know I will have for life, and a group of faculty who have continued to patiently support me for the past year and a half, I know that I made the right choice. Thank you.